Well, welcome everybody. I hope that you have had a wonderful Christmas. It is now the week after Christmas, and we are turning our thoughts towards the new year. So I wanted to share with you some practical ways to reset your classroom. And since many of my listeners and watchers are all over the globe, some of us are starting a new semester, and some of us are starting a new school year. So I wanted to share some practical ways to reset the classroom because sometimes over the course of the semester, things get a little bit harried, a little bit rushed. Maybe as teachers, we feel, the push to get through the book. And so we forget some of those routines that really support the students and you as a teacher to have an innovative 21st century experience. So this reset matters because sometimes after a break, so some of your students will have been on break for a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer, depending on where you live. And the rhythm or the routine that you had might be forgotten, right? So we want to refocus this first week back, not this week, but next, back to where the classroom is thriving and encouraging and creating that environment again that we want. So we want to reset those routines. We want to re-engage the students and help them understand how it is part of their responsibility to drive the learning in the learning environment. And we want to reestablish those agreements that were created at the beginning of the year in circle integration time. So making sure that everything has been reviewed and reset so that the learning can move forward smoothly and successfully. So we're not really talking about starting over. We're talking about just a reset. So we don't need to reinvent things that we've already been doing. We just need to review them with the students, making sure that they remember the agreements, the things that they already had, the routines they already had set up in the classroom, the expectations. So we're not reteaching everything that you've already covered. We're not talking about going over the whole year. We're not talking about adding more rules or consequences. So we're not adding more charts, good behavior charts, or more rules. We're not talking about starting from zero with routines and relationships. And we're not ignoring the progress that students have already made. So acknowledging that we've made some significant steps as we start the new semester or the new school year is important. What it does mean, though, is that we are recentering the classroom around learning, helping the students reset their mind to understand the expectations. We're restoring calm and predictability by re-establishing routines. We're listening to students again with fresh attention, right? Sometimes it can be hard mid-year for teachers to really re-engage like they did at the beginning of the year, finding that passion, that excitement for the new year. And we want to make sure that the students and the teachers understand how important it is to reconnect, to make this a relational classroom, focused classroom. So from a Finnish perspective, just reviewing a little bit of Finnish pedagogy for those who are unfamiliar or who are just learning about this. Finnish pedagogy focuses on fewer routines, but then they are used more effectively. So quality over quantity, learning before behavior chart. So We want to remember that when a student is acting out, when you think, oh, this is bad behavior, right? It's not the behavior that we want to be looking at. We want to be looking at the message, the purpose. Why is the student behaving this way? Because it is a message to us as teachers, and we need to decipher. Sometimes it's harder to figure out what that message is, but we need to figure out what that message is. So focusing on understanding and curiosity rather than rules and control. And Finnish education focuses more on reflection before reaction. So finding out what the students are really trying to say to us before we respond to that behavior. So I have 5 reset strategies for you to use next week as you enter your new classroom. First, rebuilding one calm routine. So reflect over the semester that you've had, or last year if you're starting over, and decide which one seemed to really make a difference for your classroom atmosphere. You don't need to rehaul everything. Just start with one that students seem to really grab onto and learn from. The key is to make this routine predictable, simple, and consistent. Students will thrive when they know what to expect. Stability builds safety, and safety creates space for learning. So, for example, a lesson opening, right? How students settle in and begin. You could start there. You could use a transition routine, moving between activities smoothly. Or you could do a lesson closing, right? Wrapping up with reflection and clarity. Remember, stability builds safety. When students can predict what's coming next, they can focus their energy on learning instead of managing uncertainty, right? And that's what we really want as teachers. We want the students focused on learning. Okay, reset number 2, make thinking visible. I've talked a lot about this, especially in some of the other videos, so please check those out if you want to learn more about making thinking visible. But one of the most powerful ways to reset engagement is to make students' thinking visible. This isn't about restating a fact. We're not talking about 2 + 2 = 4. We're talking about how come the process for how they got from 2 + 2 to 4. That process. Do they understand the value of numbers? Not that this shape, whatever it is, 2, 3, 4, whatever that number shape is, equals, when you put them together, it's memorized and it equals 4. No, we want them to share their thinking. How did they get to 4? So we want them to articulate what made sense, what was confusing, and what they're still wondering, right? What questions they might still have. So make thinking visible. This doesn't need to be complicated. You can invite students to share just one question, one sentence, one brief thought. You might ask them to write it down. You can share it with a partner, do peer-to-peer assessment, or say it out loud during a closing circle. And this is why visible thinking matters so much, because it really does reduce behavior issues. When students feel heard and understood, they're less likely to act out, right? When they can name their confusion, or when they understand, or when they know that the teacher is willing to hear their frustrations, they're more likely to share them, right? So they will stay more engaged instead of checking out and causing behavior issues. Number 3, reset. Shift from talking to action. So take a moment to reflect on your classroom again. Where do students talk? Where do they move? And where do they make decisions? If the answer is not very often, or just a couple times last semester it worked, it's time to try again, make a shift towards this student talk. Engagement grows through ownership, and this does take time. So hopefully you guys have been practicing this last semester. You've been giving it a try periodically. Maybe it didn't feel overly successful. That's okay. If we keep trying, if we keep modeling to the students what we want from them and continue to give them opportunities to learn how, they will grab onto it and they will begin to own it. And then you will see that light bulb light up and they will be like, oh, This is what I really want, right? When students actively participate through discussion, movement, or choice, they invest in their learning. And when I talk about movement, I'm talking about the movement within the class, right? That can be through stations. It can be through a reset moment where they get up and they stretch or they do some kind of engaging activity to help their mind take a break and then jump back into the lesson. There's lots of different ways we can use movement. Your role as a teacher shifts from delivering content to facilitating discovery, right? That's what those stations are for, to discover different aspects of the lesson, to touch on different ways that students learn, whether it's auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. Designing one moment in your next lesson where students do the thinking and you get to do the listening, right? This really does reduce teacher work time because when you're allowing the students to talk, you're hearing, you're observing, you're able to draw some conclusions and make the next lesson even more engaging. Okay, reset 4, reflect before reacting. What felt hard today? So invite honest reflection about challenges without judgment. It's okay if things didn't go well, right? It's okay if we need to learn from that, not only as a student, but as a teacher, right? We need to be able to reflect and say, oh, I did this science experiment. It was supposed to have this result, but kids, students, what happened? It didn't work. So let's figure out why so that next time when we do an experiment, we might have a better outcome. What helped you learn? Help students identify their own strategies and strengths. This is a huge, huge thing in Finnish pedagogy. And hopefully you can see the value in reflection. I realize that reflection takes time. And when we're pushed to complete an agenda or complete a textbook, sometimes it's hard to take those moments and allow the students to think. But really, research shows that reflection and time for thinking, making thinking visible in the classroom, will develop a deeper learning for the students. They will be more engaged, they'll be more excited. You will have less behavior in the classroom. So reflection builds responsibility without pressure. When you ask a student what felt hard or what helped you learn, you're inviting them to take ownership of their experience. You're signaling that you trust them to reflect on their choices and needs. You're providing student autonomy or agency in your classroom, which is huge for 21st century learning, right? It's teaching the students how to learn, how to think, which is so important for their future. Okay, reset number 5, plan for today's evidence. This was a recent activity or video that we did not so long ago, where we planned the steps for our lesson tomorrow by using today's reflections, right? So your next lesson already lives inside today's learning. Take a moment to notice what you've observed. What did students understand? Where did they show confidence? What still feels confusing? And the only way you're going to be able to answer those questions, right, is through reflection. So we want to take the time to reflect so that tomorrow gets better. So we use the evidence to make small intentional adjustments for tomorrow, either in adjusting stations or in adjusting your lecture time. Remember that lecture in classrooms is age plus 2. That's the rule we follow. So your lecture will be, for example, grade 1, students are 6 years old. So your lecture will only be 8 minutes long, age plus 2. And then you will spend the rest of your 30, 40, or 50 minutes, depending on how long your class time is, in engaging activities, right? Either individually at their desk, or in peer activities, or in smaller group activities, 4 and 5 students, moving around the stations, moving around, engaging in discussion and activities. So notice understanding, notice confidence, and notice confusion. And then what you can do, and one of the easiest ways to do this is through a learning wall. right? This is so great. I love these because they're so adaptable. So you can put a piece of paper up on a wall if you want. If you don't have those kinds of resources, that's okay. You can just use the sticky notes that you have, and they could just put it on the wall itself, or at your desk you can put a reflection jar where they put their thoughts in. So it doesn't necessarily have to be visible on the wall, but visible on the wall is really great because then everybody can see how learning is progressing. But that is one of the ways that you can have the students reflect, make a sentence, put it on their sticky note, put it on the reflection wall. And then at the end of the day, as a teacher, you can just take a few minutes, breeze over those notes, and find what your next steps are for tomorrow based on those notes. So what this reset supports, it will provide a calmer classroom because you will reset your predictable routines and set your clear expectations, reducing stress for everyone. You will provide deeper engagement because students will invest more when they know they have student autonomy or student agency in the classroom, if you give them voice, choice, and ownership. You will be able to set clearer expectations so that students know what's expected and feel secure in that. And this isn't, when we're talking about expectations, I'm not talking about the teacher saying, okay, this is what you have to do. I'm talking about the classroom agreements that you made with the students so that they created those expectations and you're just helping to implement them and keep them in place. And then, of course, we'll have healthier teacher energy, right? With all of these reset strategies, you as a teacher, you will have less work. Honestly, it works that way because the students are taking the control. They're driving the learning, and you're simply facilitating that. And that creates less reactivity, more intentionality, and which means more sustainable teaching. So more energy for you. And this can work anytime. Maybe you're listening to this video and you think, but I'm not starting a new year, or I'm not in the middle of the year. I'm in the middle of a semester, right? So honestly, a reset can be done any time of the year. When you feel like the class is getting a little bit chaotic and you want to bring back some of that, when you find that you're dealing with more behavior issues and less learning time, maybe it's just time for a reset, right? So it can be done anytime you want to reestablish foundations in the classroom, resetting the tone. Can be mid-semester, it can be after a break, or even after an assessment period. So the calendar really doesn't matter. What's important is that learning does. And so we don't have to wait till January to do a reset. We can do it anytime we feel like it's off balance, the classroom is off balance, or the engagement is slipping. Maybe, like I said, you're kind of tired of dealing with behavior issues. That would be a good time to have a reset. So what matters most is that you don't need more systems. You don't need more charts. You don't need more behavior management strategies. We just need to create clear routines, allow the students to have voice, autonomy, and time to listen. A calm reset really does change everything. So, ready to reset with confidence? If you are looking for practical tools to support calm planning, thoughtful assessment, and meaningful reflections, explore our resources that are available at RECLA Learning Studios. You'll see the QR code in the top corner. You can just grab it and run over to our RECLA store, and you will find a lot of resources that will help you with a reset. You'll find frameworks, templates, and strategies designed to help you create the kind of classroom you've always wanted, one where students are engaged, routines are clear, and teaching feels sustainable. So reset with intention, reset with care, and remember, you've got this. It's a new year. Happy New Year to everyone.